Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for spending part of your night with us. Tonight's conversation is all about understanding why diabetes continues to hit our community so hard, and more importantly, what we can do about it. So before we jump in, we want to say a quick thank you to Cedars-Sinai and Cedars-Sinai Health Sciences University for supporting this important discussion. So tonight, we are going to talk about the why behind the disparities, the everyday lifestyle and nutrition choices that can make a real difference, and even some of the exciting new research and clinical breakthroughs on the horizon. We are joined by an amazing panel of experts who are here to break things down in a way that's real, doable, and of course, culturally relevant. That's just how we do things here at Black Doctor. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves and share their perspective, share the perspective that they are going to bring tonight. So let's go ahead and bring our panelists up. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so glad to have you guys this evening.
Hi.
Hi, Jade. How are you?
Hi. I can't hear you, Jade.
You can't hear me? Uh-oh, you still can't hear me at all? Oh boy. Okay, can our producers make an adjustment? And while we do that, Dr. Abudeye, can you do a quick introduction and we'll work on getting Dr. Salvi her audio fixed? I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jade. My name is Barham Abdaya. I'm a professor of medicine. I'm the executive director and associate dean for innovation and the director of interventional gastroenterology at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're so glad to have you. Stephanie, can you do a quick intro?
Hi, yes. My name is Stephanie Carter. I have a master's degree in nutritional science. I'm a board certified registered dietitian nutritionist and also a newly certified nutrition support clinician. I've been at Cedars-Sinai working in the ICU for over 5 years now. And I'm excited to talk to you about diabetes and health equity.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you. And Dr. Salvi, can you hear us yet? Still can't hear us.
Okay. I can hear everybody else except you, Jace. It's really strange.
How did I get left out? Okay. Well, in the meantime, let's dive into our discussion and hopefully Dr. Salvi can build off of the conversation. And if not...
Okay, I can introduce myself. I'm Sarah Jean Salvi. I'm a professor of endocrinology at Cedars-Sinai. And although my background is in clinical psychology, and I've done a lot of clinical work, I mainly do research now. And so I have trials across the lifespan, both in children and family, and in adults, and varying from time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, to larger trial with Weight Watchers and things like that. So I'm happy to be here, although I can't hear poor Jade. I feel so bad.
What we're going to do, Dr. Salvi, is I will, since you hear me, I will convey the questions from Jade to you. All right. So I'll play both panelist and moderator.
Great. I'm glad we have a translator. I wish this is one of the days I wish I knew sign language or something like that to help out. But all right, let's dive into our discussion. And like I said, we'll just have Dr. Salvi build off of. So thank you, Dr. Abudeye, for translating for me. So let's dive in. So how does diabetes disproportionately impact the Black community, and what are some key factors contributing to this disparity?
Yes, Jade. So this is a topic that is actually pretty near and dear to my heart. And this work matters to me for so many reasons, obviously being a person of color. But I got into this work because tragically, I lost my mother at age 54 from complications of diabetes and cardiomyopathy. And it got me thinking about why did she have to succumb to such a preventable disease at such a young age? And that really prompted me to seek work as a registered dietitian. So a lot of what I do is trying to highlight those disparities for our community and help correct them and help people better manage their disease. I'm so glad and honored to be part of the 2025 cohort for the Health Equity Fellowship here at Cedars-Sinai. So my project is all about food as medicine and helping bridge that gap in those health disparities. So a lot of what I'm finding in my research at Cedars-Sinai is the biggest barrier to people accessing good health care for their diabetes is these social determinants of health. So whether or not they are in an area where there is not very good access to green space or to grocery stores that have a good amount of nutrient dense foods, or even that they don't make enough money to buy those foods. There are many reasons why those social determinants of health exist. And a lot of it is rooted in historical and systemic racism. So understanding that not just the foods that we are eating are leading to the development of this disease, it's that we actually have the systemic and historical racism that has contributed to where we are today. So acknowledging that fact is helpful. One of the things that I found in my pilot program at Cedars is not only food and nutrition insecurity is contributing to this problem, it's also health literacy and the lack of that. Me as a dietitian at Cedars, I only have 15 minutes with a patient to give them a lot of diabetes education, and there's not much follow-up after that. So a lot of these, individuals are falling through the cracks. And I will say, in addition to the social determinants of health, right? Unfortunately, there is an implicit bias with some healthcare providers that still perpetuates today. And it's something that if I know most people of color can acknowledge this fact and they're able to advocate for themselves when they're with their providers. But many times a lot of people of color they're turned away and they don't want to see their physician anymore because the physician's not hearing them or they can't meet them where they're at. I can say for myself as a dietitian, only 2% of dietitians are Black. 2. Out of 100,000 dietitians, only 2% are Black. So when we have dietitians saying to those with diabetes, oh, just have some whole grains and have some fresh fruit, and that's great. But I'm a single mother with a family of 4, and I make $40,000 a year. How do I make that happen? Right. So it's a lot of things outside of just what we're eating and our lifestyle choices that have led to these healthcare disparities. So with that, I want to just lead into, there are a lot of myths, right? A lot of myths that we know about diabetes. And one thing I will say is that there's a lot of shame in our community when we become diabetic. It's not something we want to talk about. Many of that is because you're looked at, oh, well, you have diabetes, oh, you're overweight, or you don't eat well, or things of that nature. And so I know when my father became diabetic, he's like, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. But if we don't talk amongst ourselves in this community, how can we help decrease our risk and support one another? So there's this myth that, oh, you weren't eating well, that's why you're diabetic now, or you're just overweight, you don't work out enough, or whatever. I actually had a patient at Cedars once tell me, we were having a great dialogue, and she's like, I wonder if it's because they eat a lot of soul food. And, I mean, there's probably that thought with a lot of people that aren't in our community. Oh, well, they eat a lot of fried chicken. They eat a lot of macaroni and cheese. They eat a lot of this and that. Not really realizing that, going back to what I said earlier, is, unfortunately, we are product of this historical and systemic racism, and we are battling that every day. And we're trying to improve our health literacy, right? And all the while not really having nutrition security. A lot of us are food insecure. I can't say what percentage, but I will say right now is, with SNAP as well, a good portion of our community are on benefits. So, having all these myths, it's like, oh, well, you don't eat well and all these other things, it's that stigma. And I'm sure Dr. Abudaya can speak to some of these myths, that it's not just what you're eating and it's not just your lifestyle choices, but there's also a metabolic and a genetic component as well. I don't know if Dr. Abudaya, if you'd like to speak to that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Stephanie. I think you highlighted key important fundamental facts about the misconceptions and about the inequity that we see with diseases like metabolic disease like type 2 diabetes. But one that I would like to fundamentally just raise awareness for is this is not a disease of life choice. It's a true disease similar to any other diseases that we deal with, like cancer, high blood pressure, any other diseases. There's clear biological underpinnings for this disease. That means people have different ways they manifest the disease at different thresholds. Some could develop it much earlier than others. So we know genetics plays an important part of the development of metabolic disease. But also there's the environment, both the food that we eat, the environments that we live in, that manifest these genes into their clinical realities of type 2 diabetes. And these are all the inequities that Stephanie highlighted very eloquently, how our genes translate to diabetes and how our diabetes translate to chronic complication like blindness, kidney disease, peripheral vascular disease, heart attacks. And all this is one spectrum. But it starts with the understanding that this is not a life choice, it's a true biological disease. The environment help accelerate and manifest these diseases, but it's very important that we take it very seriously, because it's a disease that would define our generation. It's becoming very common. Both obesity and metabolic diseases is approaching 50%, 50 of the US population, and the projection it's on the increase. That means we have to take it seriously and we have to address it both from as a disease and to eliminate the inequities that causes communities to be disproportionately affected by the disease. And definitely the Black community is disproportionately affected by type 2 diabetes.
Absolutely. And I love that you guys touched on those misconceptions, the myths, as you mentioned, because it's not just about the food that you eat. It's not about your lifestyle. It goes so much further than that, even to your genetics. I mean, it could be passed down. And so I want to talk about how can we better educate our community on prevention, because it's like we said, it's more than just what you're eating. It's more than just physical activity. How can we better educate on what really helps with prevention?
Let me convey that question to Dr. Salvi, because that's part of her expertise. The question is, how do we educate?
I hear her now.
You hear her now. All right. You're from there.
I was so excited. It was like Christmas. I mean, I can speak a bit to this in terms of education. You know, I was listening to Stephanie and Bahram talking about this discussion, and you know, we often forget that we throw a lot of information, and you know, as Stephanie said, you know, we professionals don't really have a lot of time with people, and a lot of time, like, because they're seeing so many people and they have long wait lists and they have, you know, all those, you know, or a lack of infrastructure in many areas to really support the implementation of this education, right? My husband went for his physical, and you know, his doctor said, hey, you need to lose weight, you know what to do, calorie in, calorie out. And like, if it was, you know, super simple, and that he actually knew what it meant. And so sometimes the education, or better educating, really need to become aware that what we're really saying is, you need skill in financial literacy, you need skills in understanding food label, you need to have the skills to prepare the food, you also need to have the time and bandwidth to do that, you need some, you know, creative parenting strategies to have your kids eat those things that they do not want to eat. And so I think that's where there's more work that needs to be done, of how do we actually implement and help people and support them in implementing in everyday life the things that they do want to do for their health, and that often, they may know. I've never had anyone say, what? I need to eat more vegetable. It's good for me. Right? Like there's some things that they know. It's just that the actionable, when you're taxed with working, financial concern, health concern. I'm the breadwinner of my family. If something happens to me, or if I cannot provide, it's my whole family is crumbling, right? And so all of those, plus multiple jobs, transportation, all of those things. And so the more complicated the education or the recommendation, the harder it is for people to actually sustain in the long term, right? So I'll pause that, but I just wanted to show a slide, if you can share with the rest of the group. But I feel that it really well capture this idea of we're bombarded by information all the time, and sometimes we get paralyzed. What is the right thing to do? So I don't know if we can share the slides with the audience.
We may be having yet another technical.
I'm
not sure what's going on with
it's
the
selective. Okay, well, let's continue the discussion, and maybe if we're able to share later, I can make this final point, because not only they're bombarded by information, but there's also we always think of providing the education to the individual, but any individual, any of your patient, any of your neighbors, and all are also surrounded by their own network, their own people, and maybe even other providers who are providing maybe conflicting information. And those people who are there on a daily basis may say, oh, no, that's what you need to do. You need to put cereal in the baby bottle because it helps them sleep better. Or those advice compete with, the professional science informed evidence base. And we often, don't think about those factors that are operating on people. So.
Absolutely. So turning to those professionals and relying primarily on their advice and their expertise is probably going to land you in a much better position. While we do have our village who loves to share their tactics as well. So while we're talking about our village, we all know that the holidays are coming up, and this is when we see our village the most. We're seeing a lot of our recipes being passed down. We are seeing a lot of dishes coming out. I know I am super excited for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And while we're on that topic, I would love for us to talk about potentially some of the foods that we could adjust, maybe avoid, or maybe even some new dishes that we can bring to the table. I know you guys aren't chefs, you guys are doctors and dietitians, but I would love to know, are there any things that as these holidays are coming up that maybe we should limit, possibly avoid, maybe not bring with us to Thanksgiving this year? Sorry.
Well, Jade, you know how in the Black community, you don't want to mess up Thanksgiving. You don't want to be the one that shows up with the wrong, who did something to the mac and cheese, who messed up the sweet potatoes.
I don't want to bring the green, healthy mac and cheese.
Right.
I don't want to.
Who did this, right? And I think with that in mind, our community is our source of education. So I think it's okay to bring a mac and cheese with using reduced fat milk, or, hey, this is why I made this small change, but not changing the recipe so much where the whole family is up in arms, because that is our community, right? This is our one time that we get together as a Black community and we share a meal, which is something so profound, right, in our community. So I'm pretty anti-diet dietitian, so I'll never tell my clients not to eat anything. That's just not how I operate. Restriction just leads to guilt and to shame and to overeating, and the cycle just keeps going around. But there are some good things that you can do on Thanksgiving Day. The first one is if you're an eater, not a cooker, right? If you're an eater and you're just eating that day, you're just showing up, right? You could be more mindful about your choices throughout the day. So a lot of what we say is, oh, I'm not going to eat breakfast because I want to save up for this big, large meal. Actually having something in the morning and something that's protein, prioritizes protein and fiber, keeps you nice and full and satiated, and will lead to less overeating at that big meal. So I definitely recommend having a high protein, fiberized breakfast in the morning, right? The next thing that you can do is when you're going around that table with all the yams and the mac and cheese and the biscuits and the cornbread stuffing and da 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 da, right? Let's think about what a healthy plate looks like. And I'm not a huge fan of the word healthy because I think all foods can give you energy. So let's just think of foods as being more nutrient dense or more calorie dense, right? So you want to start with whatever's colorful on that table veggie wise, right? Fill your plate with those roasted carrots, the Brussels sprouts, the broccoli, like really line up that half of your plate with those. Start there first. And I know for most people, turkey's not really their thing anyhow, because it's sometimes dry, it depends on who made it. But so then from there, go grab your turkey or whatever, your ham, and then move on to your carbs. And that's where you're gonna have to make really smart choice, right? Do you have just a small little bit mac and cheese and sweet potato and stuffing, or do you just choose one that you really want to have this year? Because it's really difficult to have it all on that plate. And as you're sitting down and you're having conversations with your community, think about eating mindfully, thinking about all the work that went in to that food, that you're less likely to just shovel it in when you say, you know what, Aunt Jeannie, she spent like 4 hours on this meal. I'm going to savor every bite. I'm going to savor my time with my family. I'm not going to rush through this moment. More mindful eating will help slow you down and prevent overeating. So that's the person who's showing up just to eat with their fork and their knife and their napkin, right? Now the cookers, they have those home chefs have a little bit more that they can be doing, and it's a little bit more. Like I said, you don't want to mess up the recipe. You don't want to bring the wrong thing, but you could do some things that maybe wouldn't call a lot of attention, like adding riced cauliflower to your mashed potato. Adds more fiber, keeps your people at your table, your family at your table a little bit fuller. For your homemade stuffing, use a whole grain bread if you're not doing the cornbread stuffing. You could also use Greek yogurt in different places and different recipes. That gives a really creaminess without all the fat, and also gives you a pump of protein. And then also your cooking methods. I had a friend of mine just say, we fry our turkey every year. I'm like, you fry your turkey? She's like, yeah, we dunk it in this thing. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I'll see you in the emergency room at Cedars. But you can lean into more leaner cuts of protein, and also thinking about that cooking method, right? Bake, broil, grill is better than the frying option, which increases saturated fats and trans fats. Just making those smart swaps is pretty simple to do. I am sort of a chef. I do my own recipe development. I got to tell you, I spent all Saturday thinking about how to make these dishes a little bit different without messing up the whole meal. I think making small changes is the way to go. Using spice, using flavor, right? Trying to come down on the butter, come down on the cream without sacrificing the taste of your dish, right? Because like I said, you don't want to be the one. I don't, I don't want to be the one.
You don't want to get that plate folded up on your dish,
No. I'm talking about you for a whole year until next year, and then they won't let you do it again. But yeah, those are some actionable tips for the cooker and the chef and the eater.
I love this. If I can jump in, Stephanie, I love this because even in our study we recommend I feel like the notion of portion control like so controlling and mean, but when you say fill half your plate with vegetable, it has this kind of it's plentiful. The other thing I would say is thinking there's a lot of stuff we put on our plates that we're not really crazy about, but it's there. So I always tell people like which food are really worthy of you, and instead of the opposite, and really indulging in the things that you really do love, but passing on the other thing that you just eat automatically because they're just there, right? And the other thing I would make a distinction is this is the holidays, right? This is not they you would need to eat like an insanely large amount of food on one day, right, to really derail all your healthy plan. But it's the every day, right? That's distinguishing that there are special meals where indulgence is kind of part of it. It's something we look forward to. Doesn't mean eating the whole, pie, but, being able to enjoy it and not restricting those moments, because it's like, holding on your breath, right? Like when you're stop breathing, well, what happened is that the next time you're breathing, you're like breathing even more, right? And so of accepting, welcoming, giving you permission on those days, understanding that it's not something you bring in your home and you eat daily, right? And making those distinctions, I think, maintain the notion of pleasure, of celebration, of enjoying those things. And anyway, if you were eating pumpkin pie every single day, probably you would not like it anymore, right? And it makes it even more special that they're around those celebrations. So.
Absolutely. I love that. And I hope everyone caught those 2 gems that they both just dropped. Stephanie said to start with your colorful vegetables. Now, I know when I go in the kitchen, I think I start with the turkey that I'm probably not even going to eat. And then I go to the vegetables, and then I pick over the ones that I don't like. And then Dr. Salvi also mentioned to avoid the food that you're just eating because it's just there. So we do tend to avoid the food that we know we don't like, which is probably, I don't know, somebody's string beans or something. If you're asking me, it's string beans. I'm probably going to skip those. But I do tend to like pick at certain things just because it's there. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I'm going to eat it. But it's like, hey, it's here. There's a kitchen full of food. Let me try it. So 2 really, really, drop the mic moments where, that could really make a big difference in your Thanksgiving. So thank you, ladies, for sharing that. And Dr. Salvi, you also mentioned a little bit about portion control. And can we zoom in on that for a moment? First of all, what is portion control? And then how can that also help you maintain your healthy blood sugar levels?
I'm actually going to popcorn Stephanie because because of her expertise, portion control. What it was, I think I would tie my non-portion control of fill out your plates in terms of when I was talking about people have a lot on their mind. They're really busy. Measuring things, calculating things is not viable in a really long, sustainable way, especially when you have, 4 kids, like work and all of this. And so those simple tricks that allow you to control the amounts that you're eating, but without the rigor of portion control. But I'm going to let Stephanie speak more about this notion of portion control and maybe relevance to diabetes, right?
Yeah, sure. In my private practice, I'm able to talk a little bit. I have more time to work with my clients and discuss meal composition and planning. And when we get to carbohydrates, a lot of people don't know the difference between simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. What something's processed and what something that's not. So once we kind of go through that process, and I explain how your body uses glucose, a lot of times people understand diabetes, but they don't understand the role of insulin. They don't understand what's happening. So I tell people, instead of measuring everything out, think about having your carb intake when you're most active in the day, right? If you're going to have dinner and you're going to have a whole plate of fettuccine Alfredo, and you're just going to sit on your sofa afterwards and watch, I don't know, Grey's Anatomy came to my mind, even though I don't watch that show, but that's not the time, because that's energy. Food is energy. Carbs are energy. So when you give your body that energy, your metabolism says, why'd you give me so much energy if you're just going to sit on the sofa? Right? That's definitely not the time. So instead of thinking about, I need to measure everything out, which I will say initially when I'm working with individuals, we do measure some things out because American portion sizes are large. And some people don't even realize, oh, that's 1 serving of rice. I'm like, that's 1 serving. That's 1 serving. So in our initial work, yeah, we do show what's a half a cup of pasta, a 3rd cup of beans, whatever. But then once you go through that, you use the plate method, right? Start with your veggies. Quarter of your plate is lean protein. The other corner of your plate is a complex carb or a starchy vegetable. And then you put your carbohydrate intake when you're most active in the day, which for most people is at the top of their day, right? You prioritize protein and fiber in the morning, put your carbs in at lunch, and at dinner, maybe you have 1 or 2 servings of a carbohydrate because people typically can't go without one. But yeah, it's easier if you do a visual method, and you just also lean into your hunger and fullness cues. You're full, you're full, right? A lot of people just overeat. To everyone's point, it's like, just because it's on your plate doesn't mean you have to clean your plate. So just allowing yourself 20 minutes to eat, balancing your plate, right? Thinking about putting your carb intake when you're most active. Those are 3 easy tips to get you through your keeping your blood sugar stable throughout the day.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned sitting on the couch after food. I know I need to move on, but is it better to potentially be active? I mean, maybe you get the family involved in a quick outside game if it's warm enough. I know it's warm here in Atlanta, but maybe get a little active afterwards.
I tell people, if you can go for a walk, if you got to walk your dog, go for a walk with a family. Any kind of activity is activity, right? There's non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, right? There's neat movement, and then there's active movement, which is exercise. So washing dishes, doing laundry, sweeping the floor, tidying up the house, that's all movement, right? So any kind of movement that you can get, but ideally you're not having a largely carbohydrate heavy meal if you're going to be mostly inactive. That's not really the time to do that, which we do. Glasses of wine and skinny pop happen late at night. Probably not the time to do that. That's where that mindful eating comes into play. But yes, any kind of mobility after you eat is key. It's good for digestion too.
Understood. And we've talked a lot about the food for Thanksgiving, but we haven't really talked about the importance of family and how having these conversations could also potentially improve our health outcomes. So how important is family support in helping someone stay on track in terms of eating healthy and lifestyle changes?
I love so much that you bring this now, because the whole time Stephanie was talking, so we have a trial, and I think the organizer, Jade, I think you're gonna put the link to this trial ongoing, but it's really like, how do we manage temptation, right? It's like, assuming we know and we receive a good plan that helps us focus on healthy behavior, but how do we help people actually do it and sustain it for a year? And so this trial is called Avoid Resist, and it's this notion that really, when it comes to things that are really tempting, you have 2 solutions, right? You can just avoid it altogether, or you can try and exert self-control and resist it. And so we're testing those strategies. It's a very large trial. We've been recruiting over 17 states, so everybody interested should definitely click the QR code or follow the link. And the avoid strategy for me is really environmental control. So instead of the portion control, is the environment control, where I always say people, like, don't be so mean to yourself. Why are you bringing those food in your home that is going to be a torture, right? It's going to be so hard for you to resist it, and you're going to think about it, and you're going to be on the sofa, and that it's calling your name and things like that. Or if you have children saying, no, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, but it's there, it's available, and it creates kind of an additional temptation calling your name. And I always say, like, be good to yourself. Don't put yourself in this position where you're gonna torture yourself. And so this idea of like environmental control, it sounds very like mean, but it doesn't mean that when you get out of your house, when you go to a restaurant, when you go to family for Thanksgiving and those kinds of things, you distinguish this notion that this is a celebration. I'm recognizing, accepting, and embracing the moment. But at home, where I could technically mindlessly eat a very large amount of food, those things, just keep them out. And it's not the same for everyone. And the bonus of this is that it may actually have good ripple effect on other people in your home, right? And they may complain for a little bit, but uh, at some point, how can you argue with, oh, I'm sorry, honey, we just don't have it. It's like, next time I go to the grocery store, I'll bring it. But those kind of strategy to help you control what you're bringing in your body, I think are really helpful. If putting kind of a friction between the access to it and limiting how but without having to restrict or without having to restrict other people intake. So, and the role of family, I mean, extremely important. And like I mentioned, we often provide individual with education, information, but then, they may not be the one in charge of cooking or in charge of preparing food. And so involving those people and ensuring that they're supportive is crucial, because if there's factors at home that you haven't really addressed, it will compete with whatever health change you want to do. But the flip side, though, is that they can also support you. And like I always give the example of Zumba, which may not be like a good example, but like church-based physical activity, you go because the intention is like, oh, I want to be, more active, or like a walking group, but the reason why you keep going over and over again is because Gina is there, Latasha is there, like those are your people, and that's what you're going, but it's sustain your engagement in those activities. So, I always say, sure, maybe your spouse or your children are not super supportive, but if you can create those kind of adjacent group that you connect with and that are supportive and that you will keep you accountable for those things, it is crucial. So that's what I would add to the conversation for now. Thank you.
And I would add, Jade, to it. It's a huge responsibility, because we know the fact that children living with obesity will become adults with obesity and metabolic disease. So it's a family affair. And when you talk about a family affair, it becomes about behaviors and cues that we need to be attuned to in order to prevent this from happening. And it comes down to, again, the healthy living is a cliche concept, but it's truly about three things. One is quantity of what you eat. Two is the quality of what you eat. And three is the timing. And these are all learnable habits that if you do it as a family, it becomes part of your healthy living routine, rather than dieting and exercising. Dieting and exercising is forcing the issue. But if you pick saying it's quality, quantity, and timing of eating, with the idea that we want to maximize the quality of the food, minimize the time that we eat, and enjoy the food so we're not gulping it all in at once, and start enacting behaviors that allow you to support this as a family, that's when you impact your children's health. And preventing your child from having obesity is going to prevent them from having type 2 diabetes, and it's going to prevent them from having cancer and heart disease down the line. So it's a huge responsibility. That's why we have to take it seriously, and it's not very difficult to implement, as long as we know it's about habit forming and supporting each other within the family household.
I would have a question for the two physicians with their trials. How would you recommend somebody who lives in like a food desert? You speak about not having certain foods in the house, but what if for my client that's all they have? And they don't have good access to a lot of nutrient dense foods. So some of what they're getting, or potentially a lot of what they're getting, is more calorically dense foods. How do your trials address that?
Well, I don't have to imagine, because so I have two trials, one in Montgomery, Alabama, and one in Antelope Valley, California, and not too far from you, Jade, Montgomery.
I actually been so I'm super familiar with Montgomery. So yeah.
Yes, and so where we work with at-risk mother and children, and in Antelope Valley, I can tell you, like the area where the services are provided, cover like an area that is really desert-like. So not only food desert, but really desert-like, where transportation, it could take for a mom and a kid about 4 or 5 hours to do round trip to the pediatrician, just because they have to take multiple buses. I mean, it's a region that is as big as Long Island and Delaware. So like we're, California big, right? And luckily, and the reason why we work with those services is we partner with home visiting services who already provide food assistance, SNAP access, and help connect them with community services, right? And so they are supporting them in accessing those foods, which, works only if you're eligible for those services. The other thing is that the most recent research on food deserts, or the effect of built environment on food intake, is that people actually rarely shop near their house. And so that the relationship between the whether it's immediately available beside you and your intake has been a bit decreased in terms of like powerful, where there's other factors involving. Now you're the nutritionist, Stephanie, so I'm afraid to embarrass myself, but you know what we talk about with the family is that, sure, if you have freshly, if you have a garden in your backyard and you have those fresh fruit and vegetable perfectly, but frozen fruit and vegetable, or canned fruit and vegetable, are often canned or frozen right when they're ripe and at the best of their vitamins. They don't have big transportation, right? Like one of the issue in our country is that basically we're eating bananas like 365 days a year, and that's not how it works, right? And so all the nutrients, and so trying to help people find appealing and alternative in using fruits, that because often for so long the influence was so much on like like fresh or bust. But I mean, I can't afford farmers market produce, right? It's like, and also it's part of seasonal, and so trying to find kind of alternatives. um so that like, I don't know if it's satisfying in any way, shape, or form, but those are the ways. So working with food bank and increasing access to those benefit, educating on what to buy and where and how, but also in the food preparation, because a can looks weird, and those frozen, they don't taste exactly the same. And so trying to open wide and move away a bit from the fresh or best. So
To answer also your question, from my perspective, Stephanie, is that's part of the social determinants of health. We should minimize food deserts. That as a society, we should try to eliminate food desert and make sure that healthy food, whole food options are available more broadly at prices that people could afford, because that is part of what got us here as a society with the problems of obesity and metabolic diseases. But then two, until that happens, which is, I said three things: food quality, food quantity, and timing. If you cannot control the quality because of food desert, you have control over the quantity and the timing. That means you know that your access to healthy food is limited. So, and that your body is going to use the energy that you give it because it needs to survive. So if you control the portion and control the time, so you're not eating all day long, you're just confining it to a set time of day, you could eliminate the risk of the poor quality by maximizing the timing and the quantity of what you eat. So I think that's where we have to be flexible as humans and use our judgment, but these are the important factors in it.
Absolutely. I love that, Dr. Abudaya, to control what you can control. Like, unfortunately, these things are happening. Unfortunately, this is the case for some, but you do have some control, and for what you do have control of, do your best to take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
And make the
And
best.
Jade, it's never too late. That's the problem. Some people say it's too late for me. I'm already having heart disease, or I'm already having type 2 diabetes. It's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is very reversible. That means, and it might be shocking when I tell you that type 2 diabetes could be reversible. It could be reversible at any point of it. But the key is having the knowledge and educating each other that it is a reversible disease, and the choices that we do could impact how reversible it is and could delay its progression.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I know we've talked a lot about the things that we can do and the ways that we can be in control. But Dr. Abudaya, I would love to hear about some of the research. I mean, there are so many promising areas of the research related to diabetes. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing and some of the things that you're seeing?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jade. Now, I spent my career trying to see if we could modify chronic diseases, not just manage them. For example, if you have infection in your lung and you come to the emergency room with a fever, we could manage your fever by giving you Tylenol for it. But unless we give you antibiotics, we have not modified that disease. We're just masking its symptoms. And when I look at diseases like type 2 diabetes, I could see we have a lot of treatments and a lot of medication and insulin that are managing the symptoms, which is blood glucose levels or blood sugar levels, rather than reversing the course of a chronic disease such as type 2 diabetes. And that became a passion of mine. If we're going to make a dent on chronic diseases, we need not only to manage its symptoms, we need to reverse its cause. And to me, as a gastroenterologist, it was clear that this disease of type 2 diabetes escalated in the past 70 years. That means with exposure to the unhealthy diet choices that we have in modern society and to sedentary lifestyle, we exaggerated the progression of the disease. That means the GI tract becomes an important target to reverse the disease course. So my research focuses on how we could leverage the GI tract in order to reverse an entity called insulin resistance. People develop one of the underlying causes of type 2 diabetes is you are resistant to the function of a key hormone that your pancreas releases called insulin. Insulin, what helps you manage your sugar, and your body gets resistant to that hormone. Now, to me, it's we could manage the disease, but if we want to modify the disease, we need to fix insulin resistance. And we start honing on the lining of the intestines, the first part of your small intestines, where in essence, once the food is introduced from your stomach, where the stomach is mixing the food, the intestine is like the orchestra conductor, is trying to conduct these signals of how your body is going to metabolize that food. And we realized that in states of type 2 diabetes, that orchestra conductor stops being efficient and start getting out of sync, and you develop insulin resistance. So we developed this technology that in an endoscopic procedure, not with surgery, it's an outpatient procedure where we go through your mouth with a small camera. We go to that lining of the small intestines and we administered small electrical pulses. And these electrical pulses, just like when you go to a dermatologist and they're giving you laser to fix wrinkled skin, these electrical pulses are fixing the diseased lining of the small intestines in order to reverse insulin resistance. And when we looked at the numbers, by regenerating these signals in the intestines, we're getting significant impact on insulin resistance. That means we're seeing the markers improve multiple folds. That means we see the hope that with regenerative technology, we could delay the progression of type 2 diabetes, decrease the reliance on the use of insulin, because insulin is part of the problem, of course. It's insulin resistance, and we're giving more insulin. Now, don't get me wrong, insulin is important to manage the glycemia, but it's also contributing to the progression of that disease. Therefore, I think having these therapies that modify insulin resistance could be an important adjunct to modern medications in order to decrease the reliance or decrease the need to progress to insulin and hopefully regenerate or modify the disease rather than just treat the symptoms of the disease.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for Stephanie. Did you want to chime in?
I wanted to just chime in, not to expand on this, but if people are interested, there's also, and I'm sure Dr. Abudaye is familiar with this research, but there's really fascinating research on chronobiology and circadian science and glycemic control and reversal of diabetes with well-timed meal, right? Because we have TVs and because we have light outside and all of this, we really kind of wrecked our circadian rhythm over time. And, we would have never thought, many years ago, oh, I'm going to eat that's, 1 in the morning, because there's a time for sleeping, there's a time for eating, there's a time for, resting, and of trying to get back this cyclical and regularity and schedule without, calling it restriction, but it's just, like 3 o'clock in the morning is not the time to go, eat fried chicken. Like there's I don't brush my teeth also in the middle of the night, right? There's things that there's a time for everything, and I think there's a nice poetic thing about this, of really, when you're doing something, you're really doing it. And what makes you appreciate this is that that's the time you're doing it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Dr. Abudaya, you also talked about the research, the therapies. You did a full-blown breakdown, which leads me to the importance of clinical trials. I always love to ask our doctors about clinical trials, specifically for Black people. Why is it so important for us to be involved? And can you just also kind of reassure folks about clinical trials, what they really are, what's actually really happening, and why it is important for them to participate?
Thank you, Jade. And that's very important on multiple levels.
Mhm.
Number one is clinical trials is the commodity of medicine. That's how we advance medicine. So developing the cures of the future comes from clinical trials today. Why is it important for the Black community to be involved in clinical trials? Because we all are made of different genetic makeups. So if the clinical trials does not have enough Black or Hispanics or Middle Easterns or whites in the clinical trial, we cannot generalize the results to say this applies to everybody. So that means if we want to be participant of the cures in the future, the trials themselves have to represent the communities that we live in and the constitution of the communities that we live in, because then we could generalize the results of the clinical trial. So if we have an important finding from a clinical trial, this is going to be the biggest cure for something, and it's only affecting a subset of the population, not representing all the ethnicities that we have in the population, then you cannot generalize the results. That's why it's very important to participate in clinical trials. And three, clinical trials does not mean that you get experimental treatments or suboptimal care. On the contrary, clinical trials they're under close scrutiny. Everything is being watched. We always make sure that the benefit outweighs the risks when you enter a clinical trial. That means, in my opinion, and I've done a lot of clinical trials during my career, is patient gets the best care in clinical trials, and that's an opportunity to get access early to transformative innovation and medications and devices that could improve your health, and to contribute to medicine by advancing the science and helping many others by the findings of the clinical trials, but also to ensure that your communities is being represented, because to enable us to generalize the results. That's why it's very important to put that plug in, because in clinical trial is the way we advance medicine, and it's very important that everybody participate in that responsibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that insight and for breaking it down for those who may still have concerns. And we understand those concerns. We understand the historical mistrust. Totally get it. But you are in a safe environment, and actually, you could potentially be receiving some of the best treatments for your condition by participating in a clinical trial, hands down. So,
and our responsibility as primary investigators in the clinical trial is number 1, 2, and 3 is the safety and the well-being of the participant. That's why it's held at a very high standard, and that's why it's a safe environment to participate and that could benefit you in the process.
And if I can just piggyback on this, because with Avoid Resist, because we've recruited across so many states, we have 40% African American, in an obesity trial, which is extremely rare. And yes, of course, important to advance science. But really, if we want to know what works and what doesn't work for brown and black folks, we need to see if it works for them. And so this idea of like, I can't, we can't find things that work for you if we cannot work with you. And I think, I often when thinking clinical trial, of like, what can the participant bring us? But ultimately is that we want to find and develop therapeutic that helps everybody and not, a privileged segment of the population. So.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, it is almost time to go. I absolutely loved having this conversation with the three of you. And before we go, I do want to ask if there was a simple step that people watching today can take immediately to lower their risk or better manage their diabetes, what would you say that is? And I'm going to ask each one of you individually because I know you guys have something. So, Dr. Abudaya, what do you say to that?
Restrict your calorie. That's the best advice I could give you. Restrict your calories.
Wonderful. Dr. Salvi.
It would be find something that works for you, right? It's like in big meta-analysis and where they compare like all the intervention, like, with small differences, like there's a lot of things that can work for you. But I feel that it often becomes a fashion, right? I'm trying this for a week. I'm trying this for a week. And really, there's nothing you're going to do short time that's going to help you. So find something that truly worked for you and try and give it a full try for a sustained period of time and see how it works. So it would be, but it's not everything that works for everybody, right? And so find something that's comfortable and works for you.
Absolutely. And Stephanie?
I would say the biggest thing you can do is get educated. Be educated about your disease, be educated about the medications you're on, reach out to a provider that you trust. A registered dietitian can help give you a lot of resources and assistance in managing your disease. A lot of times, as Dr. Abudaya said, we need to understand insulin, the role of insulin in our body. I feel as though when you have those tools and you have that education, you're better able to make smarter choices throughout your day. So reaching out to a care provider and a qualified professional to educate you would be a really great step.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you are looking for any additional information on diabetes, diabetes management, how to live a healthy lifestyle, blackdoctor.org is always a resource for you. Content is published daily within that channel. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this discussion on healthy living and diabetes. This was a powerful conversation, and I hope you're leaving with a clear understanding of diabetes, the steps that you can take to protect your health, and the importance of staying informed and connected. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their incredible insights, for dropping those gems and giving us some things that we can walk away with and share with our loved ones. And if you learned something helpful tonight, please share this video with someone you care about. You never know if they might need it. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you at the next Black Doctor Live event.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.